This fair was in May. It was a heat wave. It was 48 degrees. I remember like 10 minutes before the fair was going to open. Are you ready? Is this ready? Is this ready? And everything was ready. And then our fair director, Jaya, looked at me. She's like, why are you looking worried? Is there something I need to know? And I just said, it's 48 degrees.
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody's going to come.
It's almost heartbreaking.
It's heartbreaking.
And it's not just in the art world. I feel it's in the world of culture. I mean, I have felt it deeply in the field of archaeology. Almost heartbreaking when you need to get tech innovation in there and you just can't because people are like, well, we have more pressing matters in this country.
And I know, fair enough, but art is important. And so to get that funding, and it's about cracking that model, right? What could it look like? How can it be democratic?
And that says a lot about how South Asian art is being considered and looked at very seriously as well. There is a lot of interest that is moving in this direction. Still, there is, yes, a lot of growth needed, a lot of room that is there as compared to the other economies and the other markets. But it is actually now happening finally in the past couple of years.
Hi everyone and welcome to Don't Run Into Glass, a podcast hosted by thecitizen.in. I'm Gayati.
And I'm Anika.
And Anika, what are we chatting about today?
Today we are talking about art. You know it's my favorite subject.
Anika, how many art episodes have we had in this season thanks to you?
We will keep having them, Geti.
Okay.
You know I love it and you know it is essential to humanity.
Yes.
All right? It is a timekeeper. It is the only honest truth that exists right now.
Okay,
Do I need to go on?
Introduce our guest, Anika.
Well, today actually we have two people who I've had the good fortune of working with. Two people who've been doing something absolutely amazing since the time they've taken on these roles. We have with us Umah Jacob, Director, External Relations and Outreach at India Art Fair, and Saurabh Wasson, who is Director, Exhibitor Relations. It's all the galleries that come into the booths and come into the fair that, Saurabh manages. And the fair every year keeps getting bigger and bolder. And I cannot believe that you guys do it with such a small team. So I cannot wait to get into it. So welcome, guys.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Lovely
And it's
to be
true.
here.
I mean, I have family, friends that have flown into Delhi all the way from Europe a few times for the India Art Fest specifically. So I think it's really, it's literally a calendar highlight in our city. So I'm so glad that you guys have managed to really build it into what it is. So
No, it's been exciting, and it's been exciting to see the way it's been growing.
Yeah.
We feel this palpable energy every year and this thirst amongst our audiences domestically and internationally. And I think that's really the proof of the pudding, Yeah.
So I want to rewind a little bit because Uma, we first met, I think, in London. I know you and Anika were studying together and then you were working in Sotheby's. But I want to ask both of you individually, how did you get into this world, into the art world?
Sorry,
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was a bit of a coincidence as well. I was doing my finance education. Academically, I was literally going into that direction. And then suddenly, I've always been interested in the arts from the beginning, but not as a career option. And then I saw an opportunity at the fair to be at the fair through another magazine named Motherland. And I was like, okay, let me just give it a try, to have a bit of an art angle to what I'm doing, along with my finance and other economics that kind of works together with it. Is it something that can work together or not? And that was amazing. I really loved being at the fair, representing a magazine. And then I got an opportunity to be as part of the team at the fair. And since then, I've never looked back. It's been an amazing journey of like 7-8 years being there at the fair and kind of building it all up to what it is now.
Yeah.
So it's been amazing. Yeah.
And I think mine has just been quite organic. My father is an architect and my mother is a teacher. And they've always been interested in the arts. So I grew up in Navi Mumbai, which is a suburb of Bombay. And I remember from the time we were kids, every summer vacation, every little break, we would go into town. That's what South Bombay was called. And it was a ritual to go to Jahangir Art Gallery, to go to the CSMVS Museum, to go to the Bhaudaji Lad, and then do like an English movie in a theater there, like Honey, I Shrunk the Kids or Jurassic Park or something like that. And I always had this interest, and always wanted to know whether, there's something that I could do with it. I ended up doing my master's. That's where I met Anika at the School of Oriental and African Studies in London, a master's in art history and archaeology. And so I started off specializing in the classical. Post my master's, I then went on to work at Christie's. Before that, I was at Bonham. So I did the auction houses for a bit.
Oh, so I said something.
Sotheby's.
I said Sotheby's. Sorry.
Not a problem. So I started then.
Yeah.
So, I studied the classical at the auction houses. I worked a lot with the moderns. And then I was at Christie's in Bombay, which was an amazing experience. I was part of the small team that did the first auctions in India. That was a huge learning curve and just eye-opening in so many ways. But I think when I really found my calling was when I finally, through this long journey, made it to the contemporary.
Yeah.
And that was by joining the India Art Fair. And I think that this is what really excites me, because it's artists that are living, that are talking about and creating and engaging with our current situations, economically, politically, socially, what's going on in their hearts and their minds with society.
The artists of our times, right?
The artists of our
really,
time.
yes.
Yeah.
And that's what's special about the contemporary, right? When you work with, and I remember spending endless hours with Umah in the SOAS library. Her love for the classics is something that I know very closely. I think both of our love for the classics. She was into Indonesia and I was into Cambodia. And I think we used to pile up our books and sit behind them. And when we were both writing our dissertation together, she, the way we used to write was how an art historian would write, right? That's how we were being trained. So spending those endless hours with her in the library, I mean, both of us, I think, started our journey into serious entry into this world of art workers, culture workers, was together. I think my
very
first
much
job
so.
was when I worked with Vadera Art Gallery.
Yeah.
When I came back from SOAS. But,
But I want to just say something very heartfelt. I remember Anika once telling me that, okay, Uma's doing this, and now whatever, we graduated, it had been a couple of years. And she was talking about everything you're doing. And she was like, I'm just so proud of what Uma's achieved. And I thought that was so
Always.
genuine and heartfelt. And it is. I mean, there's
course.
a long list of credentials over there. So excited to get into this
in
conversation.
London, her journey was fantastic when she worked with Bonhams and she worked with Christie's. And I remember when she came to India and she finally joined the Mumbai team in Christie's, her previews used to come to Delhi. So that's when I used to get to see, whenever you study with someone abroad, you always wonder, when will I see them? But our little special trips were these archaeological trips that we used to take to Ajanta, Hampi, and all of that, because I don't think our love for and we still continue to take these road trips now with our dogs to wherever we can go. But that journey that has culminated in the contemporary, and the reason that we're having this discussion today with the team at India Art Fair, besides our friendship, is also because, and we'll get into it in this podcast, is because there's really a moment happening in South Asia.
Yes, there is.
Yeah. And before we get into it, let's inch towards it, right? While we acknowledge there's a moment happening in South Asia, and I want to go back to the first art fair that you had right after COVID. What you said, the thirst, that's where you saw it visibly vibrating, right? That was also the fair that I was working with, the fair where we really expanded the Young Collector program. The VIP program was amazing that year. And it was a sold out fair, right? So my question here is, after COVID, after everything that you guys built before COVID, who's buying and what's become very sustainable in the market right now?
I would say, what that fair taught us, the one right after COVID in 2022, to put it into context, normally the fair is in beautiful Delhi winter time. This fair was in May. It was a heat wave. It was 48 degrees. And was ridiculous, and I mean, generators were like, psh, psh,
I saw Saurabh running with
constantly
fans and putting it in front of galleries' faces.
It was crazy. And our biggest, I remember like 10 minutes before the fair was going to open, we were all, kind of huddled and said, okay, are you ready? Is this ready? Is this ready? And everything was ready. And then our fair director, Jaya, looked at me. She's like, why are you looking worried? Is there something I need to know? And I just said, it's 48 degrees.
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody's going to come, But what happened when we opened the gates on that day was just incredible to witness. Everybody came. I mean, it was crowded like never before. Sales were crazy. And the biggest learning at that fair was that because there weren't many international visitors at all, right? It was still 2022. And so the learning was that we as a market, as an audience, have matured, that we could sustain our,
Exactly.
the art, all of the economics of it were completely domestic buyers, almost 99% of it. And that, I think, was heartening, not only for us, but for everybody. And I think in the trajectory of the fair, that was a defining moment where we realized that, yes, we do need international visitors, we do need collectors, museums, patrons, we need the world to know what's going on here. But we can sustain it, Audiences here have that thirst, have that appetite, and there is the possibility to sustain the art and sustain the market here. That was a huge learning.
That's a big shift as well, right? That realization. And I think I would like to, as a layman, because I'm not as well versed with the art world as the three of you. And I think I would have this question more for Saurabh, because you said your background is in finance. When we talk about like this South Asian boom that we are, you just mentioned it. You said South Asian art is having a moment. What do we mean by that? Is it just the people that are buying? Is it also the South Asian artists that are like commanding prices like they've never commanded before? What does this boom look like in terms of just numbers in pricing, or numbers of just the number of people buying? What is the status of
Those numbers, I would say this boom is in the entire ecosystem. It's just not the numbers of the pricing of the artworks, but also the fact of like how many people are buying, what prices are they buying at, what is the number of artists that are actually now getting those opportunities to showcase in India, in galleries, at the fair, and also internationally. The number of artists, South Asian artists who've shown internationally, overseas in museums and in other spaces, that has also expanded a lot over the past few years. And that also kind of builds into the fact that, okay, there's a lot of support that is coming in from patrons, from private corporates and other places as well, that is looking towards the art market and the art ecosystem as a larger picture. So that boom is not just about the highest auction price of a particular artist that you see in the news, but it's much more, I would say, holistic and much more comprehensive, and it kind of supports the entire ecosystem to a larger extent. And that is the boom that is continuing. It will expand much more, and this holistic expansion is also something that kind of makes sure that this is sustainable. It's not just like one boom in like 1 year that has happened, or 2 years, and then suddenly it'll go down or something. No, it is a sustained increase and interest in the art, in the artist, and in the creative ecosystem here that has continued and will expand further as well, of course.
Yeah, exciting times.
Yeah, I think also I want Uma, because I know that with the fair, you go as a representative of the fair, but also an observer of the South Asian market in the external market outside the country. And the past financial year has been rather special for South Asia.
It has.
Can you, talking about this South Asian boom, while domestically, I completely agree with you. What's coming out of the art schools, what's coming out, the number of galleries that are
Exactly.
emerging in India, the shift from a certain segment of art towards contemporary, and the diversification in the contemporary, the support of the emerging, the programmatic depth that's happening in India, I completely agree with you. It's phenomenal. But outside this country, there is a far greater representation and great market that is developed for South Asian art, auction records or international exhibitions. Can you tell us a little bit more about how that is also lending to this kind of South Asian boom that we are kind of seeing?
Sure. So to understand the South Asian market, we also have to understand that the art market in general, there is a primary market and a secondary market. So primary market is first sale, generally, when you buy from a gallery, that's a primary market transaction. That means it's the first sale of the artwork. Now, the secondary market is the next step. So that's what you have in auctions, essentially, because that is not sold by a gallery, that's sold by a collector who's probably bought it from a gallery, and then they're selling it at the auction. The thing with the South Asian art market is that the auction houses essentially are, I would say, mainly, at least for so many years, the main meat of the auction. When you say a South Asian modern and contemporary auction at any of the big auction houses, the main meat has always been moderns. So we're talking about artists from the 20th century. We're talking artists producing till about 1960s,
Yeah.
1970s. And that secondary market is the one that is essentially, just in terms of numbers, those prices are at a different level. And then the primary market, which is more the contemporary artists that are producing now, that those numbers are definitely lower than what it is in the secondary market, the auctions. Another thing about auction houses is that their records are all publicly available. So whenever you're doing an art market report, you're seeing things in the news of like pricing, 99% of the time, that is when it's been in an auction, because they are, legally, they're supposed to put their prices out.
It's an open market.
It's an open, you have to put these out. But when it comes to primary, it's very difficult. It's not as transparent as perhaps it could be, but these are not, unless you're in the art world, or you've asked a gallery, or you've bought the artist, or you've bought an artwork. So what happened in the past year is that some of the highlights when it comes to the market is that the works at auction have been achieving, really kind of record-breaking prices. I think of all the top modernists, I think maybe the top 10 have all broken their records in the past.
Yeah, as compared to other geographical locations like the Western art market or the East Asian art market, etc., it is the South Asian art market that has done quite well this past season.
Has done. I mean, caveat is that, it also kind of, we have a long way to go. So for instance, at the starting, even like 6 years ago, if you looked at an entire 100-lot auction of modern and contemporary South Asian artists, let's say the whole auction, the total value would be at like, let's say 100 or 120 crore. To put it into perspective, that is one artwork price in a post-war contemporary Western auction. So we also have that room to grow, and we need to grow, but that acceleration is what has happened in the past year. There is now, a belief in the fact that this is valuable art, and that comes from a whole range of, economic, social factors, whereas what India is doing, what India means to the world, how South Asians are seeing themselves, how they're reclaiming their identity. There's so much to do with that. But the auction prices were record-breaking. Whether it was the Hussein that broke all records, I think, what was it,
114 or 140 crores.
That's for one Hussein. I mean, it's a marvelous work. Sold by Christie's in New York, and it was fantastic. But it's a huge moment, because then it's like this barrier that's crossed, right? That's 114 crores. That's a barrier. And then at the same time, it was other lots. For instance, there was an artwork by the wonderful artist Madhvi Parekh, whose work was valued at estimate of like a, what was it? Like a 40
to 50.
$40,000 to $50,000, and it ended up selling for like 400 something.
What?
If I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
So, it was a huge jump. And it's amazing, because finally a woman artist from South Asia living has achieved this. She's been doing great work, but she's been recognized, through biennales and through showing her work in different places. Her work with the Chanakya Foundation showed at Venice last year. So there are all these things. And then coming to your second point, I mean, me and Saurabh were talking about it, and Saurabh just mentioned it about the number of South Asian artists that are showing internationally. So last year, one of the major exhibitions was this exhibition called the Imaginary State of India, I believe.
Imaginary
The Imaginary
Institution of
Institution of
India.
India, curated by Shanaya Javeri at the Barbican in London. This was a huge moment for South Asia because it was a exhibition of South Asian artists, deeply political narrative in the Barbican, and then showing at a time when it's Art Week in London. So it's Frieze. So there are people, Frieze Art Fair, there are people from all over the world in London at that time. So when you see a museum doing a show about South Asian art during that key moment, that's a huge statement as well, That's just one of the major exhibitions abroad, I think, from
Exactly.
last
And
year.
that says a lot about how South Asian art is being considered and looked at very seriously as well, outside of the country as well, outside of the region. And that also is a one big marker of the fact that there is a lot of interest that is moving in this direction. The market, the ecosystem is maturing and reaching a level where, still there is, yes, a lot of growth needed, a lot of room that is there as compared to the other economies and the other markets. But it is actually now happening finally in the past couple of years where we are accelerating. The rate of acceleration exactly is something that is increasing and sustainably going in that direction, I'd say. Yeah.
And just to, to understand why it's important that South Asian artists are being shown in big institutions globally is because that, the big museums all over the world, they're kind of like the taste makers and like the history makers and setters, right? So they're kind of, you're showing at, for instance, right now, Camp, which is a fantastic artist collective from South Asia, from India, they're showing at the MoMA in New York.
Yeah.
Right? So like there are so many of these moments happening all the time, solo shows happening. And what happens is when they're showing in a major institution, museum, a big name like the MoMA, a big name like the Tate, like Himali and David, they just did a performance at the Tate.
I didn't know
this
that.
amazing artist duo, Hylozoic Desires. And just to see these names and these big institutions and to think about historically, you're in this, colonial institution, like the Tate that had his nose like this and was like, a few decades ago, it would just not be a thing to even consider. And now you have this programming there. So it also kind of culturally is a huge boost. It's great for the artist's career. It's great for their peers. It's great for the galleries here. It's great for the market.
Yeah.
And I think that's sort of like, it's a question that I have because my only familiarity with the art world, with the Indian art scene has been like the few galleries that I've heard of. And I think this is the first time like sitting across from you when you're talking about like the platform that Indian artists have now are getting increasingly on the world stage. It makes me think, is like Indian art moving outside of the galleries a little bit? Or are galleries still the dominant players? Like the big city galleries are they still the dominant players? Are we seeing that shift as well slowly?
I would say, there is a shift, but given the way the market is structured and in terms of the larger scene, in terms of what is happening internationally and how big our market is, galleries are still one of the dominant key players in the market. However, there is a lot that is happening outside of the gallery system, gallery model as well. For example, where artists are coming together and kind of organizing shows by themselves. There are other corporate organizations who have their CSR foundations or kind of funding projects, supporting art installations at like multiple places. So it is going beyond that, the gallery system. But still, of course, yes, the gallery system is the major or the most important key factor within the market, which will be the case for a certain time till the market goes beyond a certain size, where then, a lot of other factors, a lot of other players come into the picture, the government gets involved, a lot of individual patrons come into the picture and start supporting the arts. That's when, we can possibly say that, okay, the other players are probably more important. But as of now, yes, the gallery model or the gallery system is is something that is important, but also that model or that system is also changing and evolving given how the situation is, what the economic or other social factors are around. Galleries, for example, they may have been based in one city in the past and have had like a domestic market within that city or probably in that slightly bigger region, but now they're expanding and going into multiple different cities. We have galleries like Experimenter from Calcutta who's expanded into Bombay. We have Nature Mod again from Delhi who's expanded into Bombay. So there are a lot of galleries who are moving into different cities. The business is growing. They are becoming prominent. They're supporting a lot of artists. Their interactions, their collector base is also increasing. They're ever expanding.
Yeah.
So that constantly is evolving and becoming better and better for sure.
Yeah. I think there's also something to be said about the distinction of when you talk about the art market versus the art world. So the art market will include within it the commercial institutions where galleries, auction houses, and such will be there because there is a monetary buying and selling retail aspect to it. But when you talk about the art world, that's when it becomes much wider. Museums come into the fore and everything. So, which brings me to my next question to the two of you. In the past few years, we have seen fantastic institutional growth in South Asia and even outside South Asia that represents South Asian art, right? We've had museums come up from the Nita Mukesh Ambani Cultural Center to the Humpy Arts Lab to the Serendipity Foundation building a newer institution called The Bridge to an expanded and much larger announcement for the KNMA Museum, the MAP Museum. Many museums are coming up. Other than that, there are several galleries coming up abroad and pop-up shows coming up abroad. For example, a show came up in someone's home in London. That was an important time where that show was hosted. While all of this is happening, and you say that there is still room to expand for the South Asian market, and I completely agree with you. Can you go a little deeper into what's still missing and what should the art world, what should the patrons, what should the funders, what should the CSR, what should be concentrating on, and how can we fill in those gaps, and what are those gaps essentially?
Sure. I think the biggest gap is funding, right? So galleries are they're nurturing, right? So they find their artists, then they have to nurture them, they have to do shows with them, they have to sell the work. But then it's difficult to also ask, though a lot of them are doing this, to fund experimental projects, large-scale works, exciting things. That takes money. And that's not necessarily something that's going to be bought or can be bought even, right? If you paint a wall or if you decide to, have a ship with a performance, in the ocean, that's amazing art. But who's going to fund it? Who's going to buy it? So funding is huge. I know that there are, like for instance, in the UK, you have the National Arts Council. And a lot of them are losing their funding right now. But I think a national body, whether private or public or a combination, to fund artistic practice, right? I think that's a huge lacuna. Because we have the Kochi Biennale, we have Serendipity, we have Saladak, we have the Bengal Biennale, we have the Chennai Photo Biennale. There are so many exciting biennales and festivals like this, and of course at the India Art Fair, where we, tried, but we know how hard it is to fund an experimental project. These are not cheap, and you don't want to curtail the artist, and you don't want to, even tell them to, make your plan smaller. It's horrible. You're like, oh, but can you make a little smaller, or our budget is not this. So I think funding,
it's almost heartbreaking.
It's heartbreaking.
And it's not just in the art world. I feel it's in the world of culture. I have felt it deeply in the field of archaeology, almost heartbreaking when you need to get tech innovation in there and you just can't because people are like, well, we have more pressing matters in this country.
And I know, fair enough, but art is important. And so to get that funding, and it's about cracking that model, right? What could it look like? How can it be democratic? How can you ensure that the funding is then dispersed properly? Do people write grants? Do you have different things? There are definitely, like FICA is another organization. There are so many that are doing grants, but we need something at a national level, or
But
like
how
more
are
of
other
these.
economies, like how have other art economies solved this problem? Like just
Government funding,
government
national funding.
Yeah.
A lot of government
Germany,
funding, yes.
France, the UK, the US. I mean, the US.
Yeah.
They're facing a lot of problems, and they're shutting down wings of museums and projects
Yeah.
because that's what they were all funded by. So I would say funding is one of the biggest lagunas, which we should hopefully fill. We need more galleries, definitely. I mean, there are so many new ones popping up now. We need many more to come into the scene. We need more galleries in different cities. We're finding a lot of them happening now, but we need more of these. So I would say infrastructure in general. And then Saurabh was discussing a really interesting point earlier.
Yeah, I mean, I was like, there has to be a lot more art in public spaces.
Yeah.
We can't just have art within the galleries or in the museums because, again, we've never had a really big museum culture. So barely people go into a museum or a gallery. With the gallery, people also have this thing, oh, it's a white cube space, it's an elite space, which is not the case now. But to be able to kind of make people more aware of the fact that, okay, this art is important. It's an important aspect of your life that makes it a much more easier life to live. So you need to bring that out into public spaces where you don't have to kind of be like, oh, I'm not going to go into a museum or whatever. You can see it out there. And that is something that's really important where the government, either the state or the national government, a lot of public funding bodies can kind of do a lot. There used to be a Delhi Urban Art Commission, if I'm not wrong, in the past, which had mandated that a certain amount of space or a certain amount of a budget of a public building in the city should be reserved
1 to
for art or
2%
artists.
should
Exactly.
be for art and culture.
Exactly.
And yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of government offices from that time, if you see government buildings, they do have artists. They have artworks literally there in the compound or in the building complex.
There are
literally there for
murals by
everyone.
Hussein.
Exactly.
In terrazzo, in marble chips that are on the
Yes.
facade of buildings that
Yes.
still
and
are
that's
all
the
over
other
Delhi.
support that we definitely need for the artists of our times to be able to kind of leave something for the general people to be able to experience and be
Yeah.
like, okay, I've seen art.
Yeah.
I know what art is.
Yeah.
I can imagine it. I can experience it. I can talk about it a little bit because I've seen something. Till the point they don't see it, they're not going to be like, okay, what do I do with art? Where do I go to see it? So that is really important, like as part of the infrastructure, as part of the next big thing that we need, which is really, really important.
I think that's such a valuable point, and that's an easier fix than some of the bigger
Exactly.
things we're talking
Yes.
about.
Right?
That's not that hard to do. So I think that's a good starting point for sure. But speaking of infrastructure, and I know there's not necessarily infrastructure at all, but you said something about how galleries need to nurture talent and help them grow and all of that. I was just wondering, like, where are India's art schools? How are they faring? Have they kept up with the times? Have they evolved? Are they still producing the big artists of our times, or have they just fallen off to the wayside? Because I don't even hear of them anymore, very honestly. But I'm not in the loop at all. So
I mean, a couple of weeks ago, we were in Baroda, one of the finest schools for art in the country, the MSU Baroda. Their BFA and MFA programs, Bachelor in Fine Arts, Masters in Fine Arts. It's one of the best in the country. And we were there for the Fine Art grad show. This is our second year going there. It's so exciting, right? You see it and just the talent is there, and it's this energy, and it's just, it gives you so much hope for what they're trying to say, what's happening in the country, what are the young people concerned with. There are centers like that. There's Shanti Niketan that is still producing fantastic artists. When we look for our Artists in Residence program, which is a special program to nurture young talent, to give them a platform, we definitely look at the art schools. There are fantastic schools in Kerala, and there are trends also. So in Kerala, a lot of artists that are coming out of
Beautiful
Kerala now are
painters.
just fantastic painters.
The colors.
Just beautiful. So there are these schools, but they're not enough. And they themselves are not funded
Yeah.
as well as they need to be. And I think that they're producing, imagine batch after batch of these incredibly talented kids. But then what do they do after that, right?
Yeah.
Like where is the support, and what do you do after your MFA degree or BFA degree, there are residencies across the country where they're offering artists to come, spend some time, create work. But then what?
Yeah.
So it's this gap. So they need funding. They need everything from like better infrastructure, updated curriculum, so many things. We went to the Delhi College of Arts
Yeah.
grad show here. Beautiful building. But, it's so much could be done. So much
I mean,
could
one of
be
the
done.
easiest thing would be like it happens in other universities and colleges, non-arts universities and colleges, where you get the market people to come, the corporates or the industry people to come and talk to these students, guide them through what is the actual situation outside of a college life or a university life, and then kind of give them opportunities of, potentially working somewhere. So something similar can possibly happen where galleries are invited, other organizations who kind of fund artists and residencies and grants, they are invited to come to the university, work with those artists, see their practices, mentor them a little bit, and then kind of give them opportunities of creating works that can then be exhibited at multiple places, like as basic a model as that, which can then be further developed into, let's say, something bigger. Like all the museums that we have, the private museums or the government museums in the country, they can go to these places and kind of work with those students as well. So that interlinkages between the school and the market is something that is very much needed.
And it's not there currently, like
Not as institutionalized or not as
yeah, it's
strongly as
yeah.
it may be.
organic.
Yes.
And I mean, for MSU, for instance, why we went there is because Baroda as a city has a lot of artists,
Yeah.
because they also love that community. So it's a fantastic, thriving community with different generations of artists who choose to then settle down in
Yeah.
Baroda. So that means that when the MFA, when the grad show is happening for the undergrads and the postgrads, we're getting information from the university, but the professors are artists,
Yeah.
the other artists living in the city are the jury members, they're sending us information about it, So they have this amazing ecosystem that's helping it organically. But there's no like thrust to, actually think about it. And this thing of, how do you write a grant?
Yeah.
The fact that you need to keep a day job,
Yeah.
Unfortunately, till you can support your practice by just doing your practice. What are the real expectations? How do you polish an application, a statement of purpose? I mean, unfortunately, that is part of being an
Yes.
artist and forwarding your practice. And then similarly for culture workers, I mean, Anika, what is a course here in India that's actually telling you, even, kind of before even working in the arts, if you ask me, what will you be doing? I didn't know.
Yeah.
Right? I want to work in the arts.
Yeah.
What do you want to do?
Yeah, I have a very funny memory about this. When I was in school, I remember HT, Hindustan Times used to have an HT career supplement. And there they used to kind of
Yes, I
cover
remember that supplement.
different, one person from one profession every time. And then there was a museum person, of course, who was profiled. Their day was kind of explained. There was no artist.
Yeah.
There was one curator, and it was just a very vague description of, they do everything. They send emails, they do meetings, they kind of go and see the shows in the gallery. And I'm like, okay. I mean, it sounds fun.
Yeah.
I'm not doing anything really hard and difficult there, but it sounds fun. So, that kind of information is something that needs to be given out to students as well.
Like, what are
That
the
it
career paths in this
Exactly.
field?
The administrative training alongside the technical training that they're going through needs to go hand in hand. you know?
Absolutely. And to understand there are different avenues. So, for instance, at the fair, I'm looking at programming, I'm looking at VIP, right? So, bringing in people, bringing in audiences, and then programming it. Saurabh's looking at handling all of the exhibitors, handling all of that. So, dealing with, and all of these jobs are also interpersonal relationships, it's like managing,
Your market players.
yeah, you're
Your dominant market players.
You're managing all these expectations, you're managing emotions, you're managing egos, and then you're also managing artists. But then at the same time, in our team, we also have a partnerships team that we could not be alive without, right? Who are going into corporates. The India Art Fair is a commercial organization. We're not a foundation, so we can't accept CSR. So you are then a player where they're deciding, do we fund you? Do we fund IPL? Do we fund the Lakme Fashion Week? Right? So then it's also about like ROIs and all of these like, sponsor words and what are your, key pillars and what are your things. And then you have to show how many people have come. But that's so important because they're getting the big funding. They're dealing with BMW, they're dealing with Apple, they're dealing with all these players. So that's a job as well. And you're fully in culture. And it's completely different from being the same partnerships head in a corporate.
Yeah.
You know, you're a partnerships head, but you're at the India Art Fair. So how are you getting, with a lot of them, the corporates here at least, a lot of them don't even know what to fund. They come to you and they're like, okay, we have this
Tell
money.
us
Tell us
what to do with this
what
money.
do we do with this money? So that's a job in itself. Then there's comms. I mean, doing comms for art is a whole other ball game, right?
Yeah.
So they're all these, but like within the arts and how, we didn't know this before joining, that these
Yeah.
were all possibilities.
I want to go back a little bit. Sorry.
Quickly to this, she mentioned that, okay, we have these different teams. And also, interestingly, a lot of people who kind of work with us closer to the fair or in the lead up to the fair tend to have their own artistic practices as well.
Yes.
So it's also the fact that, okay, as an artist, of course, yes, you will have your own practice, but to be able to have a day job, these are the opportunities within the arts ecosystem that you can look for. Arts management, arts administration. We need to have more courses on that as well to be able to kind of tell the artists and the people that, okay, there are ways to kind of earn your livelihood and still have your creative practice going along with it. So,
And I think what Uma said is really beneficial. Like you have to balance a day job and being an artist maybe till you make it.
Yeah.
And like how theater artists do it or
Yes.
actors have to do it.
Yes.
Some have to work 2 jobs till they make it. It's part and parcel of it.
It takes a long time before an artist comes to that journey. And I do want to get into that, but I do want to stick with the thought that we're at right now. When we spoke about art schools and we spoke about the journey of the artist, and so many people in this world, in this art world, need so much support. Now, I remember when India Art Fair used to happen at the Pragati Maidan. I remember I worked for a gallery and I was managing their booth there. And since then, India Art Fair has grown and evolved and even changed management and, changed its mission, its orientation in a great way. So tell me a little bit about, to support this commercial ecosystem that is important, and India Art Fair is one of the biggest commercial players of the market. What has the India Art Fair done and expanded in terms of increasing access not only to the buyer but also to the artist, and at the same time kind of opened up this market to truly make it very, very approachable, to make it a sustainable marketplace, and programmatically brought in whatever it needs to bring in? Could you tell us a little bit about how that journey has expanded over time? Because I've really enjoyed that journey. like one of my favorite things that India Art Fair started doing was a dashboard. I mean, so simple, just saying what are the jobs out there, right? So things like that, and even talking deeper programmatically, even talking about how you've expanded patronage. I would love for you to bring in the Young Collector program here as well.
Sure.
Yeah.
So maybe I think one of the basic things that we worked on was, first of all, looking at language. So through comms, we wanted to expand our comms, whether it was on social media or the website. We wanted to do more artist interviews, more artist films, more, content. But at the same time, we wanted it to be accessible. So not dumbed down at all, but just an accessible, straight up language. So that, I think, was one of the first things that push helped for people to engage a little bit more, because then you're kind of saying, we're explaining the programming, we're saying, we have something called Parallel, where if you want to know what's happening in any city, what exhibitions are going on, what biennales, what festivals, what's going on, you can look at the Parallel page and you can get a listing of the galleries in your city, what they're showing right now, what are the opening timings, linked to their websites, etc. Then, like Anika said, you have a dashboard. So basically making that digital presence stronger. Then it was also about programming at the fair. So we realized early on that instead of looking at Western models of what an art fair is, so if you go to a major Western art fair like a Frieze or a Basel. I mean, they're stalwarts, they've been around for a while, but they're also dealing with an audience which is very mature.
Mature, yeah.
In India, we realized that we need to develop a model that works for our domestic audiences. So, one is yes, the buying and selling of art. But beyond that, it was also a moment for us with the art fair of how do we engage the wider audiences, you know? So that was through programs. So, you know, whether it's the talk series, whether it's the performance arts series, then we decided to take the curated art tours very seriously. Because what if you have no idea about the art, but we know so many people, you know, who come in to the fair on a Saturday or Sunday to look at it. You want to know a little bit more, you know? So then we started this program where we would get a curator on board to train young people to do, you know, thematic curated art tours, right? Then we did also a whole program of workshops and a whole program around inclusivity at the fair. So whether it was for school groups or differently abled or people with disabilities, and then it was also for arts educators. I mean, Kriti Sood at Land runs something called the Thinker's Garden every year, where it's like a 3-day workshop at the fair for educators on how to integrate art into their curriculum, how to really talk about it. Then Siddhant Shah with Access for All. And these are all external consultants that have been working with us for years. So now they feel that ownership of the fair and of this property, you know. So they'll have, you know, Siddhant, for instance, looks at everything from making braille maps of the fair to making tactile artworks to, through him, we've inculcated this thing of then having all our talks signed. For any of the art tours, you can have them signed, you know, to do special workshops. So that kind of made it, you know, made us open our arms and say everybody is welcome, you know. And then
Yeah, I mean, and also the fact that, okay, all of these programs in a way have linkages with the content that is being shown at the fair. Be it the tactile artworks, these are actually original artworks that are being shown. And then there's a tactile version of it that people can touch and feel and experience in a different way. So that integration with the actual content is also something that kind of makes the audiences feel that, okay, you know, we can experience art in multiple ways. It's not just me going there as a buyer trying to buy an artwork and that's the only reason I can be there for. No. If I'm there for over the weekend, I can go around, take a curated tour where I can get an in-depth experience and understanding of, okay, why this artwork is here, why did an artist make it, what's the context or the backstory of it. I can get to touch and feel it and experience it in a different way. I can go to the talks program and kind of listen to the artists and the curators and the museum professionals who are working together to kind of build something like that, and as to what is the reason why they're working in it together. So that integration also, I feel, is much more interesting for the audiences, where they feel much more open and invited to come and experience it anyway.
And I think that's the crux of it. Like, how do you make art less elite and more inviting?
Exactly.
And I'm glad you spoke about accessibility. I think that's such a big component of it. And that gives across the message that there's an authentic effort to make it more accessible as opposed to just, you know, for the sake of it.
Yeah.
But I do want to come back to the Young Collectors program a little bit, because I know that was Anika was involved with it. And that was my first sort of association with the India Art Fair. I came because Anika really, like, I mean, I used to get an email from her every day, those newsletters that used to go out.
I remember those very excited emails and like peak summertime to be like, get excited.
Yeah.
But I want to talk
That was
about
my favorite bit, by the way, to write those emails and to also train the people that were working with me in drafting. I mean, how do you invite someone in a heat wave in Delhi to a farmhouse that is a bit difficult to get to watch artists that are extremely emerging, to watch a program, you know, that is happening for the first time in such an expanded way. I mean, Young Collector program did exist before, but we had expanded it. We'd put a mission to it. We'd put so much heart and soul into it. So those email drafting were my favorite moment, because that was the first, like, reach out to the people, right? But yeah, sorry, I digress.
I mean, the Young Collector program started with an aim of, so the fair is limited in the sense that of space.
Yeah.
It's limited in the sense of how many days, the actual main fair exists. We do programming through the year, but that's like our main property, right?
Yeah.
The fair. We want to do so much more, and we found that there was this real interest from the younger set, but it was tentative, and we wanted to do something where we, really encouraged this engagement of the arts. So it started out with something that was just like parallel to the fair. So it was, okay, this group of young collectors come to the fair. We'll do a special walk for young collectors. So young collectors meaning, yes, young people interested in engaging with the arts, but also people who are young in their journey of engaging with the arts. So it's, it
Who
means...
won their first introduction to the arts.
Yeah.
And it started with that. And there was like one artist studio visit, one home visit of an exhibition in a home. And there was a special walk at the fair. That received a lot of interest. So the next year we did a little bit more programming, and we did something outside of the fair, and we did a little like party and a little thing. And we saw that, okay, this is growing. And then we really wanted to expand it because we believed that, okay, this is the moment to do it. And that's when me and Annika had a real brainstorm about, in a magical universe, what would it be like?
How
like
fun.
what would we want it to do? I remember, and then, literally, had many discussions. Then she worked on this like whole big brief. And then came and pitched it and was like, okay, let's do this. And we had no funding, nothing for it at that time. But, somehow, and the main crux of that was very beautifully thought out. It was a young patron supporting a young arts institution. And that's when Annika found Mathstar Base to come in and support Method.
Yeah.
Well,
it's so like, there's so many linkages that have like come out of
and
this,
they've
right?
lasted
They've
because
lasted,
I think the Young Collector program became successful in its outreach in that way, because the point of raising funding to support an institution that would not be able to afford a booth at the main ground because they've just opened. So to raise that funding, to bring them to the fair, even if it's a parallel thing, and then to bring audiences to them. And now, 5.5 years hence, that gallery has not only been recognized, but grown, but opened multiple spaces, and is continuing to do the same work it had intended to do from the beginning. So it did work in that way beautifully.
It really worked. And it was great to see how people came together. So, for instance, it wasn't with Mathstar Base. It wasn't just that they came in, funded it, and sat back. They got fully involved, right?
They threw a music festival. They brought in Jyotsna Shori Dance School, that is now Kilaka Dance School, who we actually had a podcast
That's where we
with.
first saw this combination of Anisha dancing and the Mathstar
And
Base
contemporary music.
Yes.
Bharatnatyam and contemporary music, and a gallery supporting emerging art.
And even the space, Stir in Chhatarpur, we went there and we asked Amit, who runs Stir. We presented this ridiculous program to him and said, give us your space. And he did.
And he did.
He believed in it.
Fantastic patron.
Exactly. And I feel like there were so many people in that first year that were just like, okay, take it. Okay, let's do it. Go ahead. And that really, I think, helped boost the whole thing, whether it was the artist, whether it was community, whether it was someone like Amit giving us a space, or Mathstar, or Method coming in, with no holds barred, and just being like, okay, we'll manage it somehow. I think that was a fantastic thing.
amazing.
And I think the team also really, for us, that was, like the delicious treat that we could enjoy on the side. And I think it was new and interesting for everybody. And that was the summer year as well. So again, it was purely domestic audiences.
Fully.
young
Everyone came
people.
out to support it as well.
Opening night
It was
saw
really
over
well.
700 people come in, and that was a very guarded invite list because it was blowing up.
Yeah.
And people were coming to me. They were like, "This one is coming with +3," and I was like, "I don't think we can do that because there might be a traffic situation over here." And I was like, at the last night, sending emails that please, these are the rules and regulations.
God,
I'm getting
Anika's
scared.
emails are still like, it's like I got a flashback when I started talking about it. But I want to move into like we've really covered art, and I think you've given us such a honestly rich perspective of what the art scene in South Asia is like. But I'm going through a very existential phase of my life, right? So I'm going to present some sort of like some questions that require that are like food for thought, and I would like an answer from both of you. So the first one I'm going to start with is, why should art matter to the average person?
I would say it's everywhere, like especially for us as South Asians. And this is something that we discussed initially, that we as South Asians, we live in an ecosystem which is creative from the very core. We have our crafts, we have our traditional visual arts and different traditions that are there as furniture, as like design objects, as like a cutlery, it's everywhere. We don't have to specifically say that, okay, art as a painting is art and that's what I'll consider and look at. So it's there for us to consume everywhere. We don't have to kind of stop. It's an essential part of our life as South Asians for sure. And then, of course, as a very big cliche, it makes life much more easy to live.
It does.
You are, for example, you're going through a sad day, you listen to your favorite song and you feel a little bit upbeat about it. Now, art doesn't mean necessarily you have to talk about a painting. You look at a painting and you feel good at times. That can happen as well. So it affects you on all levels. Now, whether you are able to access it or not is a different conversation altogether, which we have discussed and which we can discuss much more, of course. But it's essential part of life. You can't ignore it. For someone as I would say, economically not so well off, they listen to songs, Bollywood, for on. Yeah, they watch movies. That's all art.
Yeah.
That's all creative expression that is making a life a little more easier to kind of go
More
through.
joyful as well. And I want to
Exactly.
give, again, I keep bringing like my kids into everything these days, but this was a really beautiful moment. So I live in my husband's family home is like a Satish Gujral designed house, and my in-laws were collectors of art. And I have no background in art or in like really like my only interest in it has come in through Anika. But my children,
Funnily enough, Getty is a great artist, by the way. In LSR, during our history honors
Doodler.
classes, when we were in our BA program, BA honors class, she used to be reprimanded for doodling.
I'm a good doodler.
Yeah, she's very good
make
doodler.
great
And,
sketches.
in her house, she had many works that she had done with crayons and pastels. She was quite good, actually.
Yeah, I had like that natural talent that no one ever
And
really
by the way,
developed.
so was Uma.
Ah.
She has made me, I think, 2 canvases, one right after SOAS. Long time ago, yes.
But Uma,
And
I can
remember
picture it. Like I can picture you on the other side of this art world.
thought
As
about
just,
it,
that artist.
she was very good. Purple was her favorite color. And I remember the first time I went to her family home in Navi Mumbai, there was this big mural on the wall of a tree that she had done.
Really?
Yes, and some of her
Love.
earliest gifts when we were very like broke, right at the beginning of our careers, she used to gift me artwork that she used to make. Look how times have changed. Now we gift each other actual art that we buy
That
from
was also actual art. It's
Yeah,
Uma's
no,
stamp
but
on it.
of other artists, not self-made art.
But
You guys
that's how
have
you
come a
see how
long way.
integral art is
But
to our lives.
coming back
you
to
know?
my example, so my daughter, like my kids, they've grown up in this literal art. Like it's like, from the architecture to like the work that's hanging on the walls, it's art. So she's looking into the courtyard. She's 4 years old. She's just looking into the courtyard and it's raining. And she's just silently staring. And I'm waiting for her to say something. And she's like, my house is really beautiful. And I'm living somewhere that's really beautiful. And I was like a 4-year-old and it was beautiful because it was raining and it was green and it was lush. But I was like a 4-year-old's ability to like appreciate something that's beautiful, like that is really, and you're right, art is all around us. It's just our ability or our
Exactly.
we have to just pause and
Yes.
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's It's also, I mean, the most cliche thing is it is a record of our time.
Yeah.
This is going to be our next existential question to you guys. Okay, let us ask it. It's a question. Is art a timekeeper?
Yes, most certainly. And I think it's the most unregulated one. So it's the most
Exactly, yeah.
truthful one.
Yeah.
Otherwise, if you're looking at like timekeeping, what is it? Archival material, photographs, documentation, historical records, government records.
Yeah, like the news, but you can't rely on that anymore.
But art is the one that's renegade, right? I mean,
Yeah.
in whatever way it is
Protected
also,
by bouncers, we invite cube, rooms, and it's really telling a story. If you don't like it, you can leave. But like, it's really like a good timekeeper.
It's telling a story, and it's also telling a story that's very personal. So it's a personal history also. So it might be a reflection of, okay, something that's happening, socio-politically, but it's the artist's lived experience or their commentary on that. So that I think is super important, and that's the most truthful.
Yeah.
Okay, last existential question before we go to our next very exciting round that could or could not get you in trouble. But taking from your thought about timekeeping and an honest truth that the artist is telling, and since you guys have just finished your rounds of the art schools, okay, let's just draw from the art schools right now.
Okay.
What is art telling us about the India we're living in right now? What are those artists talking about?
You begin, Umah.
You can expand it beyond the art schools.
Yeah. No, but with the art schools, right? A good example. They're unafraid to say what they need to say, but they're also still forming their opinion when it comes to art schools, I feel. And a lot of the things that we found, so, there were a couple of people, I love their work. And then senior artist that we met actually was, no, they could have done something. So we asked, remember?
Yeah.
What do you mean? We thought it was reason. They're not being experimental enough. They're not pushing it enough. Because this is the last chance they're getting to be experimental. They need to understand that. Because once you get out of the cocoon of your university, you're going to have to think about the market and you're going to have to think about funding yourself. But in terms of what they're saying about it, I mean, there's the usual. It's the drama of the youth, right? It's your personal strife. A lot of it is personal, but a lot of it is also now pride in, it's kind of like taking back pride. And this is a trend we're seeing across South Asia, where you're looking at your roots through a different lens. This generation at this age is very aware of where they come from, what they want to say, how they want to say it. And that is what is heartening, I would say. There's not as much freedom of expression as we would like to, but in what you see, there's a renewed sense, I would say, in person and in place, and understanding where they're situated and taking their time with that.
And I think, when we talk about the freedom of expression part, as they mature, once they come out of the schools, that's when they'll also kind of understand how to kind of subtly express what they want without, overtly kind of putting anything out there. And it's on to the viewer to understand what the artist is actually trying to express in there. I mean, that's one of the hallmarks of a great artist, of course. So that is also something that they will learn. But as of now, of course, there's a lot of their personal history, their personal narratives, their identity that they're talking about and thinking about through their works. And as Umah mentioned that, okay, this is potentially their last graduate shows that they're doing is potentially one of the last opportunities that they may have where there's complete freedom to experiment, which sadly, I mean, it wasn't that visible per se. And potentially that is something I feel that could have been, done a little more.
But that's all our fault,
Yeah.
That's the world we live in right now.
Exactly.
And that's something we
That
all
is the world
struggle
we
with.
live in. And I think that's happening to so many people.
So many.
Everyone's
And I
doing
think
the
artists
safer line.
also are thinking in terms of, what will galleries pick up? Because while they can experiment, they also
Yes.
want to be picked up by a commercial
Yes.
gallery,
Exactly.
right?
Yes.
So they are like relying on sculptures and canvases more than a performative piece, primarily because, I mean, how are they going to sell it? Like I really want to be picked up now by by a gallery.
Yeah.
So and I feel so deeply for these artists, and
Yeah.
I really feel that one great gap that I hope people like us continue to fill, especially people who work independently, is artist support. You know, just these artists speaking to artists is also so important, but artists speaking to art workers being like, let's negotiate what you want to do versus what you can sell, you know, what you can actually build a livelihood off or build a career off, you know. So yeah, but okay, and let's get into the rapid fire section.
Okay, so we're going to just ask some questions. You have to be as unfiltered as possible.
Okay.
And Uma will go first because you're the veteran in the industry now. Okay, so one artist to watch.
I would say Debashish Paul. He is an artist, represented by Amami Art. He was one of our artists in residence a few years ago. He's beloved by the team. Just a beautiful, beautiful soul, and doing fantastic performance art work, and then also documenting that through his painting and his drawing and his photography. But certainly someone to watch out for.
Okay.
Sorry.
For me, it'll be our lovely colleague, Alina Define. She's an amazing artist who works with images, photography. She's recently showcased at Chennai Photo Biennale, and then her exhibition also happened at the Museum of Art and Photography. So again, yeah, she's capturing the everyday life for you to kind of see through her lens.
Amazing.
And she's going to go great, yes.
Amazing.
Okay, the most overused word in the art world.
We were talking about this.
Curated.
Curated.
Everything is curated.
I think that's overused even outside the art world. I get so
Yeah,
upset
it's
when
your
people
curated
use.
coffee experience.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's your curated,
Yeah.
And it's just like, no.
The other day, a creative director and someone who works in events came up to me. She's like, "I'm a curator," and I was like, "Join the gang."
Yeah, but it's true. Or like a curated concept store. Everything is
Everything.
curated.
Everything is curated.
Yes.
Now, Uma, you
Immersive.
immersive.
Every single sponsor, everyone who wants to give money is like, it should be immersive. An immersive experience, something that's immersive. I really don't know whether they know what it means, but this immersive, and I'm sure artists hate the word immersive because I'm sure all of them are getting this
Yeah.
immersive.
I feel like artists should respond by this. Sorry, excuse my joke, but I can't help myself. Phata poster nikla hero. Phata canvas nikla artist. It's a very famous dialogue. Okay.
An artwork that lives rent free in your head. Uma.
So I mean, this is cyclical because you see something and then it sticks with you and you see more, but some things stick longer. And I'm also partial, so I love this artist called Bhasha Chakrabarti. She's fantastic, and she's just a fantastic painter and artist. And at the India Art Fair, it was a work for me that I would go and look at when I needed some calm amidst the storm. It was called Samudra Manthan, and it was just beautiful. It looked like, there's a whole explanation behind it, but it looked like it was, it could be the sea, it could be blankets, and it was actually a piece about love, and it looked like a bed with blankets after, in the morning after two lovers had been there.
Your face is lighting up talking about it. So this obviously has had a big impact on you. But Saurabh.
For me, I would say there's one South Asian artist, Zulfikar, and their practice is a lot more based on gender, identity, ecological issues in South Asia. And one of their series was Towards the End of the Earth. And there was one particular work in that series which was called Muscleman Pehelwan. So you see two images of two pehelwans, like in the traditional way, literally strangulating each other. And then a lot of velvet and gold embroidery around it, which kind of just mesmerized me. I was like, okay, wow, that's a very subtle way of putting, delicate fabric and embroidery with these, really muscled up pehelwans together and kind of putting that juxtaposition there. And then the other would, I would say, Sunil Gupta, the photographer, his series of The Exiles, where he's also captured monuments in the city in Delhi and couples literally there having a personal time,
Aw, yeah.
completely unaware of what is happening around them, and kind of he's captured those images.
Because that's such a classic part of like how Indian couples,
Yeah.
right? Like, you go to
Exactly.
those little monuments, you
Parks
find a
and
little
their
corner.
romances.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm glad someone
Benches
managed
are
to.
for couples only.
And then they with that part they need to stop, but they sort of like
Yeah,
inscribe a
carve their
heart, like,
initials.
and
You
the
know,
initials.
actually, I was asked this question when I was interviewing for a job at the Archaeological Survey of India. When they said nowadays, when you go on historical monuments, you have couples that have done this. What is your take on it? And I said, as an archaeologist, I consider that a part of our modern history because that aspect also has come on to the monument because monuments have been safe spaces for romance, for
Yeah.
couples. And I was being interviewed by 3 archaeologists. 2 of them actually loved that answer. They were like, yes, actually, we also don't remove it all the time. Sometimes we leave it. Asha loves Uday,
As we talked about, it's also art that's keeping the time,
Yeah,
the record
there you
of
go.
time.
Yeah, it
You know,
is
what
it is a
happening at
timekeeper
this
because
time.
actually an archaeologist functions different from a conservation architect. Conservation architect brings the monument back to
Back.
former glory. An architect keeps it, an archaeologist keeps it in ruins because it's a time teller. A lightning struck the
Yeah.
upper turrets of the minar, so it fell down. So we have not reconstructed the extra floors, things like that. So even those little love letters and those little, please call me, don't be upset, Maya, they're part of like our, in the early 90s, I think this trend started.
A fun fact is in Bombay, and my mom told me this because my mom and dad fell in love in college in JJ at that time, proper like hippie time. And she was telling me that if you've noticed in a lot of parks in Bombay, it's very weird because they have only single seats. So they've taken out benches from a lot of them and put single seats.
Because they didn't want people to canoodle on them.
Like discourage.
How
That's
funny.
so mean. That's so sad. It's just like a single seat and then a gap and then a single seat.
I'm pretty
like as
sure
if they
those
won't sit on
couples
the
found.
grass.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they found other corners. Like that probably didn't stop them.
Yeah,
But
behind
good
two
attempt.
behind 2 flowers. Okay, the next question: the weirdest thing someone's ever asked you at an art fair, Saurabh.
Weirdest, I would say. I wouldn't call it weird, but slightly unexpected. Like, is there a prayer room? I was like, you're at an art fair, prayer room. I mean, of course, we can accommodate it, but I didn't expect it. That was the most unexpected, kind of
Interesting.
thing. Yes.
Yeah.
maybe something to build into the next edition.
Inclusivity.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
We take all feedback seriously.
Yes.
I've been asked a lot. There's a lot I can't talk about. But I think the funniest is when you're showing somebody work, and so many times, every edition, then they ask if something is art, right? So then you pass a wall or like a jutting out something.
Is this also?
Is that? And then sometimes I feel like saying, yeah, man, yes. Would you like to buy it? It can be a really good deal.
No, but it happened to me at the Met. Where I was at the Met once. I'm very embarrassed to admit this. It was me, my brother, and a friend of ours who were meeting from Delhi. And we'd gone up to the terrace after seeing all the exhibits and all of that. And this was their more experimental attempt.
rooftop commission
The
that
rooftop
they had,
commission.
yeah.
So all that was there is they'd taken out some of the paneling from the floor, and there was just water in there, like like how like our some
after
panel
rain,
comes
it'll be
loose,
like,
it's
yeah.
drained or whatever. So we're just walking, and then security guard comes running. He's like, "You can't step on that. You can't step on that." So I was like, "Why?" Like, I mean, it's just a puddle of water, like on the terrace, like on the roof. He's like, "No, it's art," and I was like. Okay, I'm embarrassed to admit this because I was actually stopped for confusing something, but it did happen. So I empathize with those people that ask you whether it's art or not. I've never admitted this to anyone, and now I've gone ahead and admitted it on a public platform.
Good. Well done, Getty.
Okay, next question, moving on. Hottest collector city in India right now, and one that's totally underrated.
Hottest in the sense that you mean there are already established collectors
yeah.
there? In India right now, I would say.
Or like a city which is really the next few collectors are really emerging there, you know? It's like
There's a range, right? I would say hottest collector city is Hyderabad.
Oh,
There is stuff happening. We're going to be doing
Yes.
something soon. And we just feel like the city is ready. There is an appetite. It's just about what what happens to it, but we feel like there's a lot of possibility and engagement. And then we've also been noticing that from a lot of cities that are outside the usual Delhi, Bombay, Cal situation, for instance, Baroda, I wouldn't say collector city, but just art city, Ahmedabad, a lot of collectors and a lot of interest. We've been meaning to do Indore and Amravati, because we've had clients come from there and really buy. So I feel like these are very exciting.
Yeah.
Chennai now, the scene, every year we go, it's growing more and more, and the young people are taking over. So I think there are like pockets of interesting things happening.
Cool. Okay, young collector question. If you had 50,000 to start your own collection, what would you buy first?
Dollars or rupees? Or
It's rupees. Come on.
Rupees.
This podcast is based in India.
Young
and we're talking about
collectors.
India Art Fair.
Young collector, art for all,
Oh,
accessibility.
it's like a fantasy.
Difficult. It's really difficult to kind of.
And it's to start your collection. It's your first purchase of art.
I would say come to the Young Collectors Program in all seriousness.
Yeah.
I would say that's what you should do. Because even, I would say, with the art schools and things, yes, but that is nuanced. With them, it's their first time, they're understanding pricing. We've had conversations with them where we're like, you need to charge more for something. So I would say go to the Young Collectors Program. But if you're asking me personally, I don't know. I think that's a difficult
Quite
question because
tricky, Like I have a list already on my phone of, artists whose works I want to pick, of course. Alina's one of them, of course.
Yes.
So it's like 50,000 doesn't do justice.
Yeah,
no, but you can get.
Yes.
Of course you can get.
with
I've worked with so many emerging, I've curated a few emerging shows at this fair as your
Yeah.
parallel
Yes.
programs.
Yeah, exactly.
And I made sure that my shows had a significant number of artworks under 50,000 because
Many.
Yes.
Yes.
Galleries like Method, galleries like this new gallery called Futures, even the independent artists collectives that are doing shows. I think I'm guilty, not guilty. I am lucky to have collected a lot of works under 50,000.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And Annika has directed me to works that are in that price range as well.
Yeah.
Several. I think we.
Yeah, there's a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There are so many. And that's
Obviously,
really
when I look at
important.
it from the artist perspective, it does not do
Exactly.
justice to you. I want to
Exactly.
give you more, take my money, But
Yeah.
from a
Yeah.
from a new collector perspective,
Yeah.
I think that's really growing.
Yeah, I would say definitely. So you say Method, then you would say Futures, then there is Immerse that just concluded.
In Bombay.
They had their show in Bombay, Art and Charlie.
In Bombay, yeah.
In Bombay. Then I would say, who else? Even a Stranger's House in Bombay.
Mumbai, yeah. Anything in the south?
In Coach with their show that they had recently celebrating 25 years of Peers.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
They had several. And then, of course, you can also try, looking at prints, looking at limited edition books,
Yeah.
looking at drawings, sketches, looking at photographs, edition pieces.
I would also say directly buying from the artists, especially the ones that are graduating from art school. Artists are very particular about not selling the works that they want to keep in their portfolio that are going to galleries, but they have a lot of study works that could really help them with supplies later on,
Yeah.
They do. But I would say that if you are new to it, don't approach an artist yourself. Think of them as like, you've got to make sure that you treat them right and you know how to deal with them. Go to a curator, go to
Go to
someone
an
who
art
works-
advisor like
go
us.
to an advisor. Go to a curator.
Go to a curator
Yeah.
like us.
Yeah.
Let
And
us
ask.
speak to the artist for you because
Exactly,
most often
exactly.
the sensitivity of someone who's very vulnerable is very important. Yeah.
Okay, last question. Last rapid fire-ish question. I don't know how you guys will answer this one, but fill in the blank. The art world would be better if Dash took a sabbatical.
We are salaried employed people. But to be fair,
I would just want everyone to know you both answered this question like completely uncensored,
Off the record.
Off the
off the
record.
record, off the record.
But essentially, I would say, everyone who's in the arts ecosystem is an equally interesting part of it.
And a character.
Exactly. A character in themselves. Everyone has their own quirks, and that's what makes the ecosystem much more, interesting for us, much more
Okay,
fun
very
to be
diplomatic
part of.
answer. I'm not interested
Exactly.
in it. Too diplomatic, guys. But anyway.
No, let's switch it to this question. Is art still for the elite in India? Or are we finally breaking the frame?
Oh,
We're
we've broken
breaking.
it.
Yes,
We've
we're
broken
broken.
it already. Yeah.
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 It's definitely
Like
something that is totally affordable.
Exactly.
And I always tell people, it's less than a fancy meal with drinks. You can actually support an artist with that amount. Forget swapping a vacation for it or a handbag for it. It's literally, if you live in a big metro like a Delhi or a Bombay or a Chennai, Bangalore, Cal, what you would go with one other person and spend for a full meal with drinks, you could
Easily.
use that to really, and that's when it comes to purchasing. Then to engaging, there are so many opportunities. There are so many places to go. I mean, there's the India Art Fair. There are galleries in your own localities or cities. Then there are the big festivals. Go see the biennales, go to Ladakh, see Sa Ladakh, go to
Yeah.
Kochi Biennale, go to Serendipity Arts Festival,
Yeah.
go to the Bengal Biennale, go to the Chennai Photo
The art
Biennale.
calendar in India
It's
is
exciting.
amazing. Like I feel
Yeah.
like I remember I was talking to a travel magazine. I was like, if I had to just put a monthly view of the art calendar, it's like someone could plan an entire year sabbatical
Yeah.
just looking at art because from Ladakh to Chennai, from Bengal to Gujarat, you have
have everything.
so much happening,
Yeah, and that's also pure visual arts. Then if you consider cultural and you consider historical and classical and all of it.
Yeah.
So
There's a
we're
lot.
running out of time. So I want to just sum it up, even though you guys have already answered this in your own way. And this question is for you as well, Annika, because you're also quite immersed in the art world. So all three of you, what excites you about the future of the art world in India? And is there anything that you would like to change about it? Let's start with Annika.
Me. I think what excites me about the art world is this ever expanding roster of artists that are coming out into this hyper connected world, who are being informed in so many several ways that their practice is expanding. What is also exciting is that people like us are opening newer spaces, helping newer spaces open to represent these artists. So, like I just said, the ever expanding art calendar is giving more and more opportunity and more artworks to come out in the public realm to be experienced. So, I find that very exciting.
Saurabh.
For me, I would say I'm really excited to see, because now a lot of artists are working with different mediums. It's not just the traditional painting or, let's say, fabric or textile or sculptures. They're using a lot of digital media as well. In the past, a lot of artists have also done that, but then that's been quite limited. But a lot more are engaging with it in different ways. And I'm excited to see what can come out of it. Like at the fair itself, we have a really big artist commission that's being supported by BMW, which is completely immersive. And
Guilty.
exactly. And it's like full on tech based. So that is what I'm more excited to see, how that expands further and grows, and how artists kind of use technology and digital mediums to kind of use that and express their creativity.
Yeah.
That's a good point. I would say, in general, I feel that we are so lucky to be working in the arts in this region at this moment. I could not say that more clearly. We've worked abroad and we know contemporaries who are working in the arts in other spaces. And honestly, this is the most exciting. So whether it comes to artists, where they're coming from, the stories they're telling, whether it's artists from the Northeast, from Odisha, from like deep South Kerala, like Kanyakumari side to like the heart of the country. And their voices are all so different and so unique, and they're embracing their indigenous, qualities and thoughts and ideas. It's fascinating to see. The art is exciting. I've had the privilege of traveling quite a bit to see art in different spaces. And honestly, one of the best feelings is, that rose-tinted glasses you have of like, oh, I'll go to Venice and, I'll see the Biennale for the first time. And, you've been thinking about this for like years from the time you've ever thought about art. Oh, I'm going to see this Biennale. I'm going to see this museum. And honestly, what's amazing is you come out of there. Yes, it was beautiful, but it's not with that, I wish. It's more like, I don't wish for any of that art to be here. I think the art here is exciting. I think my thought is, I wish we had this platform. I wish we had a museum like this, because then this artist's work could go here and this artist's work could go here and we could do this programming, because what is being created over here is the most exciting.
How cool.
Yeah. And I think in terms of change, I just think it's curriculum. I think all the kids, right, need to grow up. So whether it's art in public spaces, whether it's art as a part of your life, going to a museum, going to a gallery, understanding the importance of art and how that can help you emotionally, how that can help you to just understand your community, to express yourself, to, make connections, to form bonds. I think that is one thing that we need to change, because if we get the kids,
Yeah.
we've sorted it
I
out.
mean, that's how we all. I mean, I'm still appreciative of art because my parents just dragged me to every single museum while I was a child. If we traveled to a new city, we went to the museum. And in fact, I was just thinking that the summer holidays are coming up. I need to take my kids to the museums here.
Yeah, they're doing great
Yeah.
programming.
Yeah.
We just spoke to the team at KNMA. They have like full summer camp activities going on.
Yeah.
And I'm sure a lot of other spaces are doing things as well.
Yeah. So that's a good takeaway.
I think one thing that I do want to close, my favorite moment this year was when the Tate Modern showed Himali Singh Soin and David's art. And I go back to once when Shashi Tharoor said that there is a amnesia in British curriculum about the colonial history.
Yeah.
But then you have the Tate Modern showing a part of colonial history told by Indians about the salt tax. Basically, there was a line that was drawn with the help of a vegetative hedge across India. And as soon as you crossed over to the other side, you were taxed for the salt. And these two artists went and researched that hedge and recreated that piece through block prints, through salt, through performance, and performed it at the Tate Modern.
Love
At
it.
the Tate Britain, actually, which
the
is
Tate
even
Britain.
more significant.
Exactly.
Love it.
And it was really this moment that I felt very proud that they were reclaiming South Asian history in a place that was, and I don't mean this harshly, but curriculum plays an important role, in a place that had removed that curriculum from their discourse. And I really wanted to kind of mention how South Asian art is, that's what we meant when we were speaking to you, how it was having a moment internationally about how people want to see and want to listen. So, but on that note, thank you both.
Thank
Thank
you.
Thank you
For
so
coming and
much.
sharing with us what art does to us in our daily lives. Sorry for my crass dialogue about Fata Candice Nikla artists, but
had to put that in there.
that too is art in terms
Yeah.
of the Bollywood posters,
Exactly.
going down to the emerging artists, going down to the fantastic India Art Fair. We wish you so much luck for the
Thank
next
you.
edition and kill it. Bolder, bigger. It's always
Anika's commanding
it's
it.
the best.
Always better. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. It's been lovely.
Thank you so much for having us.